Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Joyce Raimondo, and I am the Education Coordinator at the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. We are a national landmark. We're located about 100 miles east of New York City on Long Island, and we are the home of the foremost abstract expressionist painters, Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner. We hope you visit when we reopen in the spring. Go to pkhouse.org to schedule your in-person visit. But I'm very happy to present these virtual programs, and this is part of our series called Beyond the Brush. And today we have a special guest artist, Roz Dimon, who's going to share her digital work and how she views using digital technology at times instead of a brush. So I can't wait to hear what she has to say. Roz, do you want to just say a quick hello, and then I'll give a little introduction about Pollock and Krasner and how this all relates.
Sounds great. Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank Joyce Raimondo and the Pollock House and Center, if I'm saying that correctly, for having me on this program. I've actually been to this program to hear other artists and art historians speak, and I think it's wonderful. I love the way that Joyce ties what the excitement that happened out here years ago with things that are going on today. So thank you very much. And it's great to see friends I already see some collector friends from Carter Burden, Nawa, and Texpressionism and other places that I'm a part of. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And Roz is zooming in from her studio, which is on Shelter Island, which is on the east end of Long Island. So before we start Roz's talk, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction about Pollock and Krasner for those of you who are new to art, to see how, so you can think about how Roz Dimon's work relates to or even extends some of the ideas in Pollock and Krasner's work, even though it's very, very different. So let's see, you can think about what they have in common and how they're different. Okay? The property where Pollock and Krasner purchased their house in 1946. They moved here in 1945. And we have this spectacular view overlooking Accabonac Creek way in the background. Pollock's studio was originally situated in a little concrete foundation, which is in front of that golden area. And Pollock and his friends moved it so as to not block this beautiful view. When you come to the National Landmark, you can go right into the barn studio where Pollock painted from 1946 to 1956, and Lee then used the studio after his death 1 year later in approximately 1957 until the end of her life. And you could also, of course, visit the historic home. So let's just talk a little bit about Pollock. What is Pollock doing here? Well, for one thing, he's using a completely new technique. You could say even a new technology. His method is groundbreaking. Rather than using a paintbrush to apply paint by brushing it onto the canvas and touching the canvas, he's using the brush as a stick. And sometimes he's using an actual stick, the stir of the bucket of paint. He's not using art materials. He's using house paint. So if you want to draw a parallel, well, new technology, digital technology, it's a new tool. It is a new art material. But we'll see in Roz's talk, are all of the techniques she's using, are they traditionally art techniques? So that's a question there. But at any rate, he's breaking new ground. He's breaking rules. He takes the canvas off the wall, off the easel, and places it on the floor. He says he wants to work from all four sides, similar to the Indian sand painters of the West, who he had seen at the Museum of Modern Art. And that's his words. He used the term Indian. Now, Pollock is making gestures, he's moving, and the paint is recording his movement, right? A gesture is a movement, and he says it's energy, movement arrested in space. When we see the final product, we can actually trace Pollock's movement. Similarly, what you'll see in Roz's work is when you see her gestures, you can trace some of her movement, right? This is called action painting. Why is it called action painting? Well, because we see him in action. But what makes it unique is that the action is not disguised. The movement of the artist, right, is evident in the final result. Historically, of course, all artists move when they paint. But here it becomes almost like the inner life of Pollock literally pouring out into the canvas through his movement is very obvious in the final result. And in that sense, the action and the physical object of the painting almost become one. And this opens doors for not just expressionism, but also for performance artists for years to come. And of course, this is very brief. This discussion of Pollock's work can get very layered. He had many, many influences: Picasso, Mexican muralists, Siqueiros, who taught him how to use unconventional materials, the surrealists, many, many influences. This was not just arrived at overnight. In fact, it was a very slow, methodical process, a process where Pollock is going in and no longer painting the observed world. He's painting from within. He says, I want to express my feelings rather than illustrate them. Now, Lee Krasner is Pollock's wife. She always painted. She supported Pollock's career, but she didn't promote her career while he was still alive. She helped him become successful. This is one of her famous techniques where she would cut up old artworks, tear them up at times, and then reassemble them, paint back into it, sometimes do drip painting and other techniques, and maybe apply more collage. Sometimes all the elements are interlocked. They're very, very large. She's also an action painter. You can see her technique here. Pollock and Lee shared the idea of improvisation in their work. She didn't start off saying, I'm going to make a painting about autumnal red. She lets it come through her. She says, I surrender. I don't will the painting. Pollock says, I let the painting lead, right? So in that sense, they're not aiming towards an end idea. They choose the titles after the work is finished. In fact, Pollock called his work number 1, number 27. Sometimes his friends would even suggest themes and titles after the work was done. I'm curious to see with Roz, what is her creative process? Does she do planning in advance? Does she let the image flow? Is it a combination? Or in her planning, if she does planning, how do the ideas evolve? What are her influences? And what made her choose her methods and materials, right? This is all about modern art. I love it. It always draws from the past, but then it also innovates. It pushes forward. Some people are afraid of artificial intelligence, but let's see what technology can offer us if we use it in a creative way. And I hope that we also use it for good in a general way. Let's create something beautiful, good, thought-provoking, helpful, kind. Okay? So I am so thrilled to introduce Roz, and I'm going to read her bio, and then she will take it away. Georgia-born artist Roz Dimon was an early pioneer in digital media. Her content is American-centric, from guns to Jesus to her recent portraits of Abraham Lincoln, showing at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum from October 2025 to March 2026. The artist worked at the World Trade Center, leading the first digital media communications for such giants as Deloitte and WSJ.com, while curating international blockbuster shows and showing her work internationally. Featured in 1990 in Forbes magazine with David Hockney, she now creates multi-layered paintings called Diamondscapes that invite interactive access while remaining strictly a painting that stands still and invites contemplation, connecting now to the traditional realm of painting forever. You can see diamondscapes.com to see more of her work. Recently back from a group museum show in, well, you can help me pronounce this, Uzbekistan. Her next,
Uzbekistan.
okay,
Uzbekistan.
thank you. Her next venture will be to speak and share a diamondscape at the upcoming Iceland eclipse in 2026. How exciting is that? So now I'm so pleased to have Roz share her art and her creativity.
I particularly liked how Joyce talked about touch and emotion, and the past. I'm going back in the past and helping you understand how I started using digital media. I'm starting with a drawing that I did at the University of Georgia. This is like, I'm getting to be an old geezer here, but this is about 1974. I'm at the University of Georgia. I'm at the Lamar Dodge School of Art. And this was a pivotal piece for me because I was working with a teacher who immediately in my first class said, "Wow, well, this woman obviously knows how to draw, but what is she saying? And what is she touching? And what is she feeling?" And that just really exploded my world. And art became just about everything. And this is a drawing I did subsequently in this man, Mr. Olson's class, um, where I instead of going after the model, we had rigorous kind of traditional training, and of course we're using traditional media here, Conti crayon on paper. But instead of going after the model in front of me, I saw this woman across from me in the classroom, and I just was touching her face, feeling her. And I remember Mr. Olson came up behind me and he said, "Someday you'll be famous." Well, I was like, fame, that's something we could talk about right now. I think not just Warhol's 15 minutes or 5 minutes of fame. I don't know, maybe you get 5 seconds in today's world. How much does it mean? But it means a lot to be seen and to be seen by your teachers and your professors, and it just filled me with joy. And I remember coming home to my family in Atlanta and letting them know that he said, I was going to be famous. And I remember I was like kind of at the dinner table and somebody said, "Oh, good. Well, pass the beans." And I'm telling that story because we all have to make it on our own. No matter what anyone says to you or about you, whether good or bad, as we know, being an artist and continuing to be an artist is one of practice and endurance and will. I'm going forward here and I'm going to the next slide. hmm And my first, just wanted to share that my very first, I'm going back so you can kind of understand why did I start painting with a digital brush. Now, this is not a digital brush. This is a portrait of my mother in 1979. I'm in Atlanta. But upon looking back, these portraits that are oil on canvas, they're about 3 feet high by 2 feet wide. I did about 10 of them, and I showed them at a gallery in my first show in Atlanta, Georgia. And looking back, I realized that yes, they were traditional oil on canvas, but technology was entering my art even then. It seemed that I wanted to somehow connect even deeper from the wall to that space where the viewers were. So I recorded while I was painting these people. I was painting my mother, and I said, "Oh, just talk about anything and stuff going on. What is it like?" And she started talking about raising teenagers, and including me. There's some very humorous stories on these things while I was painting them, and it was called Talking Heads. So when you entered the gallery, people entered, and it wasn't just the people talking, but actually it was the portraits talking off the wall. So going forward. Um, my pieces actually were starting to change and they were very influenced by an urban environment. I'm still in Atlanta, but I've put a credit card inside this piece called Woman at the Bus Stop. This is owned by an early collector. I've got credit cards in the air. I've got newspapers. Collage is entering. Now we're not into digital at all yet, but these are just kind of beginning things. I also was, it seems looking back too, that almost all of my work is about America in some way. this is all about the dollar, and I tore up a dollar, and it's got coins in it, and it's about 5 feet wide, and it's there's a lot of collage entering this. But I was busting out of Georgia, and my father and mother had lived in New York City when he was studying at Columbia. My father's a surgeon. I get those hands from him. I could draw since I was born, actually, could draw, which also comes from my grandmother's. I'm very grateful. But I was just busted out of Atlanta. And when I got to this city, New York, note that I always source everything. I do that in my Diamondscapes as well. Like I say, thanks to Shutterstock, because this is for a nonprofit venture. But all these squares and energy and urban, not just the buildings, but what was going on between the buildings just immediately hit my canvases. I did want to just say for a minute, and here this is a stock shot too from Alame, is that my first New York apartment was advertised as a garden apartment on the Upper West Side, and I just wanted to let you know that this was the garden. For those of you who love New York City. Anyway, you know these movies where they show these people on the 26th floor looking out over the gorgeous New York. Well, it's not quite like that really when you land. There's lots of sacrifices, but boy, I was in love with this place the minute I landed. And one of the things I loved most about New York is its tolerance. So many people from so many places, for the most part, getting along when you consider how many millions. I was very influenced early on by people like Laurie Anderson, and not just for the fact that she was using technology, but that she had so much heart and emotion. Uh, Ed Paschke, one of the Chicago famous artists, loved his pieces from the beginning because, yes, they have this electricity that speaks to now. I was feeling that in the city, but they also are about people and they're about their relationships with each other. Nam June Paik, also very amazingly forward in the technology arena, but all about, the United States and things going on and the interrelations and color and form that has a certain beauty. So my paintings immediately responded. I'm in my little Upper West Side apartment and I started doing these pieces. And believe me, you can paint anywhere because this was like I guess, a 8 by 8 by 8 foot square room. And, my kitchen, we've all seen these rooms in New York, my beautiful garden apartment. But there's a way, if you have a need or a will, you can always paint. And so, I was painting. This is called Kevin and Jane Take a Walk in New York, owned by an early collector, but you can see the squares and the electricity. My hairdresser, I was borrowing the bottles. I mean, I only went to the hairdresser like once every 3 months, given my budget. But I said, I want to get this electric squirt. And he gave me these bottles he had. And I would squirt things onto the canvas, the image of these two people, because the energy, the action, much like Pollock, I was touching and my brush was more and more filling up. See these squares? I'm at jury duty. And I'm watching the judge, and this is just this. We're still in traditional media, but you can see how these squares and time and sort of these montages of information all going on at once. This is 1983, are taking over my pieces. This is a canvas. It's um, 40 something inches high, a little bit more, 50 by 36. It's called Bartok. But you can see it's not just about the people, but the city is infiltrating their conversation. I'm a spiritual and religious person too. So for me, it's not just painting the people and their feelings, but all the other things that the things that are unspoken between them that you can feel. Um, a chemical bank. There used to be a bank called the Chemical Bank, and believe me, I was working in these places as a secretary. I'd only last a little while because I had my habit of art that I had to support. But these jobs not only paid me a salary so I could do what I wanted, but they also influenced. I mean, I was in American life, and I just enjoyed watching everybody on the phone and doing things at one time, and I called these information paintings. Sorry for that noise, but for some reason my clicker's not working. Hey, nothing changes in technology. Anyway, this is my first show called The First 1,133 Days in Manhattan. And it was all my information paintings. It was a competition. I was just thrilled to death when I won it. Sorry about this, but let me turn this off. The paintings were getting bigger, and there was more and more squares and circles, and math is really entering the picture here. This is called June and December. Sorry for this noise. Joyce, do you have any knowledge of maybe this will do it? Okay, I'm gonna use the phone.
We don't hear any noise
Oh, you
really.
don't? Oh, good. I'm glad. Okay.
Nothing that's disturbing. No.
Oh, great. Thank you. And just one last piece. I mean, I did many of these information paintings and drawings, but here, it's not just a furry dog anymore. It's walk la dog. Everything is electronic. I'm definitely not using my paintbrush in that lyrical way I did with my mother, and things are changing. And I went to the first class at the School of Visual Arts in like 1984. And you have to remember, I tell younger people today who I love working with, but I go, no, wait, you don't understand. There was no internet then. There were some of us who were responding to this pixelated digital world who were working in traditional media, and we had really no idea what was coming. I didn't even know what a pixel was at this time. But I'm shown here, you can see my rotary phone, and you can see these huge blocks of these computers. The early ones were really huge, and you only had so many colors. Here's my infamous husband, who's been a wonderful supporter. I love hearing about people in the past, but often, and this is not to denigrate the women, but many of the women that we know about in history through in art were married to either famous men or art historians, and not all of them. And I salute their work very much, so don't take that wrong. But I do love that I have a husband who supports me very much, and I don't mean just monetarily, but in every way. But this is an early portrait of James, four colors on an IBM. I was thrilled to death. It was 1986. It showed huge on a auditorium at the Javits Center. People were paying attention to digital. It was the early days. It was just so new and different. This is almost like a funeral to my paintbrush. I could tell. I mean, I reluctantly put away my oil paints, but I just was not painting with those anymore. Like Pollock, it just kind of it came out of me. This had to happen. And I actually included the toolbar in this painting. And whenever I'm doing these pieces, I'm still, of course, very much a part of a physical world. This is not the AI world. This is a physical world meeting a digitally technology influence world and making these pieces using technology. I'm using software. Like right now, I'm using Deluxe Paint. And just like a painter would move back and forth, which I used to across my studio, to get in and out of a painting, I can zoom in and out. I can go click on the toolbox here, anything in it, and get a paintbrush or anything I want, and it actually follows your hand. So you're working inside the computer to make this, but you get these incredible pixelated lines that you can't get with a traditional brush. And it's a brush that speaks to now. It's a brush that says pixels, electricity, even in the way it's applied. This is a piece called History's Interloper. And all of these pieces, I was taking a picture of the screen of the computer and then going to Baldev Dugal, which a lot of you artists probably know in New York, and he would make a chrome photograph of it. So I was always thinking how I could take these from the computer and make them on the wall. So they exist in both places simultaneously. And this is all about the plug that has completely transformed our lives, like a little jackrabbit. Um, oh, here, let me click this. Lost in a City of Dreams. I'm just taking you kind of through the history of this whole experience in digital. I'm now painting digitally, and it's a little frightening to me. I even started painting flowers because I was just it was scary, but it was also terribly thrilling. This is called Lost in a City of Dreams. I also often would start with photography and then layer these different stories. And I agree. I once heard, I think that Joyce spoke to it when Pollock said, it was about not only the action, but his feelings. And I'm always telling stories and my feelings. They always have titles that speak to that. Here's an early digital show. Now, this is in like 1990, one of the first digital shows in New York City. And you can see all my pieces. I've made most of these with either Lamont, which is another wonderful place to get your pieces either realized in print and digital, and also Dugal. And it was a huge gathering of people wanting to see what these pieces were all about. I was getting some notice, and I would just tell all artists, I probably don't need to tell you, but you never know where you're going to be seen or heard or something's going to happen. But I was invited to be in a little show in New Jersey of florals, and I put my florals in. The next thing I knew, the collector of AT&T, who happened to live in New Jersey, said, "I want to come visit you." And she came to my apartment. I was living with James at that point. I was finally in a place where my parents were not afraid to come visit me in New York City. And she said, "Well, oh, I'll take this one, I'll take that one," and I was just thrilled out of my mind. It was a huge sale, and they're still hanging in the top one of AT&T's top digital um, corporate collections. One downtown at the AT&T building, and a few uptown. And I was just very pleased to have this happen. I was asked to design a cover for, I mean, Al Gore really was on top of not just climate change, but he did coin the information highway. And there was a coterie of us in New York working in digital, and we were all getting to know each other a bit. It was exciting. This is 1994, and I was asked to do the cover. I was working at the World Trade Center. Always kept working because, yes, I was selling the occasional thing, but it's never been about just selling. It's about communicating to your world and saying what you have to say. And I took all these images of Al Gore and people pumping in the World Trade Center gym. And this is actually a magazine that folds up and it looks like an American flag. As I said, it just seems Americana always enters into my work. I have three of these now, and three signed by Al Gore. So it was fun because James, he said, "Oh, I'm going to call up Al Gore's office." He was the vice president then. And he said, "And I'm going to tell him that you will sign three of these for him, Roz Dimon, if he will sign three for you." Well, he did call up. They put him through to the press office, and they were so sort of tickled with Roz who? And they said, "But we'll get three to you." So I do have three of these signed, and I'm thrilled to have them. Um, and if anybody wants one, let me know. I was in Forbes magazine, as I said in my bio. Very thrilled about this, living downtown in Manhattan in my loft on Forsyth Street when I heard that I'd been, that I was in this article. And it was also with some other digital artists, but I went out and tried to buy every Forbes that I could on every street corner. And I was interviewed by two women, and they asked one of my top collectors, Jonathan Pardee, who I've mentioned. Um, and they asked Jonathan, who lives quite the lush life in Newport, Rhode Island, and they said, "Can you tell us, why would you trust this floppy disk that, this digital artwork she does that, or all these artists do that, they can make millions of copies where the original never is erased?" And I loved his answer because he said, you have to trust the artist. And actually, we've been able to, as Walter Benjamin has talked about, the age of reproducibility, we've been able to copy for a long, long time, ever since photography or even before, but it much more instantaneously. So it is very much about the trust of the artist. If I'm going to do a digital edition, and I say there are only 10 at this size and 20 at that size, that's all there's going to be. um, Featured in Intelligent Agent, which is Christiane Paul, who's now the digital curator at the Whitney. She was early on into every new thing going on with digital, and I was thrilled that this piece of mine, The World's Greatest Bar Chart, is in that. There were other artists working at, I'm going fast because I have a lot to say, and I must mention, Joyce and I talked about this, but we were both shy children, and I was so shy, literally, I hung behind my mother's like skirts, when people come to the house, and we always had tons of people come to our house. Everybody in my family is totally outgoing, extroverted, and I was so introspective and so shy. But you know what? When you find out who you are and what you have to say, um, it's certainly not about being afraid. And yes, we do have to let our voices be heard. I want to attribute, there were other people at the time. We started a group. I started it with my first computer art teacher, Rachel Gelman at the School of Visual Arts, this group called Picture Element. And I'm still showing with some of these people today. Just returned from Uzbekistan showing with some of them. And we thought, the pixel, it's like a picture, it's an element of the picture, and it's vital and it's changing the world. Also, at that time, I'm getting into the more recent pictures, but you're certainly seeing the evolution of digital art, and I'll be going more into my process. But this is a show, my first time I curated. By this time, I'd been working in corporate, and I realized that I really enjoyed working in corporate art. As well as dabbling in in fine art. I think those two things should actually cross-pollinate more than they do, because there's a lot of commerce in fine art, and there's a lot of fine, wonderful art in corporate, like learning about fonts and rules and then breaking them. This is a show called Code, and I worked with Rico Maresca Gallery, and we invited. It was a big blockbuster show in Soho in 1995, and we did some really exciting things. I worked with Michael Davis, who is a Harvard grad architect who did the Sony Center uptown, and we tried to do things on a very low budget. So we had all these computers at different levels, including for children, so that everybody could interact at different levels. We had Shar Davies' piece Immerse, where people could immerse, and other friends and I, we had very innovative ways of inviting people in. There were 300 people at that show. And I remember my parents said they thought there'd been an accident in Soho. I said, no, that was all the people trying to get in my show. So that was kind of fun. And it was a lot of fun. I say that because it was a lot of fun. Um, and I just want to point out that New York was becoming the Silicon Alley to San Francisco's Silicon Valley. Rhizome, which is still today part of the New Museum, which has an extension opening soon. The International Symposium of Electronic Art was a conference that many of us were attending. Special Interest Group SIGGRAPH has been internationally showing the latest things going on. Art Dirt out of the Walker Art Museum was doing a lot of interviews with all of us, and there was a group downtown doing all this stuff. Now, while I'm doing these paintings and my brush is changing, every year or two, a new computer would come out that would cost more money. That would just like, I'd have to figure out how I didn't need a new refrigerator, but I had to have my latest computer. Um, I was working at Deloitte. I started the first new media department at Deloitte, and I was thinking about going into academia, where most of my friends who I've talked about have gone and headed up the first digital departments. But I found it so exciting to work with others, and also went on to the Wall Street Journal Online. Was paid a huge signing bonus, and in the late '90s to go from Deloitte to the Wall Street Journal and work on the most creative things you could possibly do. And I was always inviting my fine art friends to be part of things that I would do corporately and vice versa. All of my corporate friends would be coming to my shows. And it was a very exciting, fun time. I think a very important piece from that period, and one of my premier kind of pieces called Washington Pig. I hope you can't see the "you are screen saving" stop share at the top. I don't know how to get rid of that. I'm not going to worry about it. But you can see that the computer, I can do much more now. This is all digitally painted. And you can see "For Sale in Washington's Eyes," "The Country of Africa is in his ear," "Honk If You Love Jesus" is right in his mouth. There are little pigs everywhere, like little buttons, and every man needs a house, a wife, and a dog. And it's the words to go in every language. I mean, it is my ultimate Americana statement, but it's not just, I never look at something from one point of view, or I would be doing posters, which I think honestly can be extremely uh, provocative and relevant, but I'm always looking at things from multiple point of views, which would make me a terrible politician. But I'd say this is a celebration and a critique of America. And it does say "God bless it" in the corner, but I don't know. I hope that's still going on. Anyway, um, there are five of these pieces. I said this would be an edition that would go out that would be 48 by 36, and I've done a few APs for a few select people. One who's in the audience, one of my favorite people, Marion Brownlee. I have to call her out. Very supportive collector. You have to stick to what you say it's going to be. Of course, it lives nascent in the computer. This is a piece, I'm watching my time, called "The World's Greatest Bar Chart," done while I was at the World Trade Center. I worked for Lehman Brothers, where we just were in the department digitally drawing one bar chart after another, going from Excel into all these triangulations and charts of all sorts of money, having a lot of fun together working the night shift. We all had a limo home. I mean, the money was flowing in the digital.com at this time. And this piece is a still painting, like all of mine are. It's a piece you can put on the wall, and it's a chart that basically kind of explores the insanity of everything. But also you can go online, and I could do it right now, but I think I'm going to give you the URL. It's "The World's Greatest Bar Chart," no punctuation.com. And if you go into this piece, it's been what you call rolled up, because I did it in an animation software that's no longer, no one can access it anymore. So I worked with a young programmer who I work with almost every other week, or have in the last few years, on Zoom. And we together roll this up so it is online at the World's Greatest Bar Chart. And you can go interact with this. And it's a real phenomenon of not just image, but sound. And I have to give a shout out to Carmen Borgia, who worked with me and was brilliant at, you can roll over the outside icons and get a sound and mix it with any of the inside icons. Um, it won't make you rich, though. This probably isn't a bar chart for President Trump. Anyway, here we go. Information painting, information woman. It's about a woman whose thoughts are taking over her brain. That's been happening for quite a while for me at this point, and still is. This was an invitation that it looks rather antiquated now, but it was a very state-of-the-art invitation in the late 90s to my show at the American Gallery, run by Ron Shipman, who very supportive and great dealer to work with in the late 90s. And you'd put this in and you'd get this funny kind of advertisement about me and how you can come to the show and have a little oinky pig there. And I would sign the CD when you got there. The show I had this blow up pink furniture and I had these animations running on the top of the ceiling. By that time, I always kind of kept my hand in traditional media as well. I mean, I would be working in digital, and then I would just think, oh, I just want to do these in like, Conti crayon on paper. And I did this whole series while I was working at the World Trade Center of these artifacts. Again, America, Perrier, Coca-Cola. And I have a whole series of these called Artifacts One. And I'm just going to play you quickly an animation that was on the ceiling.
I don't know, honestly. I was just so depressed. I couldn't really stop myself. I mean, I reached for the Diet Coke before I even knew what I was doing. And it wasn't really even a conscious thing. All I can say is my life is different now.
I want to make sure. Can you guys hear the sound?
I mean, I haven't been depressed and
Very cool.
I don't know. It's been 5 years now.
Can you hear the sound?
Yes, the sound is fine. Yes,
Oh,
we
good, good,
can
good.
hear it.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if I turned that on.
Excellent, excellent.
Okay, so we're getting into the high old days. Oh, I see. I'm going to have to speed up. Walter Lika of the Metropolitan. This is me
Listen,
and my
Roz,
younger.
take your time. Don't worry if you go over a few
Okay,
minutes. It's
well,
all good.
okay,
It's all good.
great. Walter Lika, who was the curator of European paintings at the Met until his tragic demise in 2015, was a big supporter of my work, and Michelle Legal from Deloitte, who's just followed me ever since. And this is at the opening of the show. Things were just so high at that time. And I'm bringing this up because we all know as human beings that, you're on these high times, things are wonderful, and you think, well, what could go wrong? Well, this is where I actually worked for 10 years and I lived within 16 blocks. The dot-com fell in the year 2000, early 2001. My husband and I both lost our jobs. We by then had bought a little place in Shelter Island. We were feeling like, wow, we can buy a place outside of New York. And but it was never my intention or his to ever leave New York City. And we both lost our jobs. And of course, the World Trade Center came down. This is the front of our office at the Wall Street Journal, where, I think I mentioned I've been paid a signing bonus probably a year before to go work for them for 120,000. I was at the top of my game, both commercially and in fine art. And it all fell apart in a year. Uh, and I'm not just talking about me. I mean, this was such a calamity. I'm so thankful that I got away with my life. But I remember my mother calling me out here, and I just couldn't imagine a life outside of New York City. And even though I did love Shelter Island, but not as much then, it was new to me. And she said, "Wow, I'm so glad that you were downsized," which I was, because I had like the most plum job you could have there as a creative director, taking stories from the paper and making like 20-page stories into like 2-page interactive bar charts. It was just a thrill. But the world sends us real curveballs, of tragedy, and what do we do with that as human beings and as artists? Um, I'm jumping ahead here, but I had one of my first really, really dark periods because I just didn't see a way forward. I was out here in Shelter Island painting dump ink containers. Oh, too bad I didn't put one of those in here. Getting them out of the dump and painting them with my friend Jeanette Lavarello, and she kind of saved my life. She did paint by number, and I started working with her. Her daughter was a friend of mine. Said, "Why don't you go over and work with my mother for a while?" And I was, I had got us. I did get us making a new corporation called Dump Incorporated, but with all these painted things of Windex where you couldn't tell what the products were. I still have them in my house because if I'm going to do something technically, I want to do it really well. So there are things in the shower. The shampoo stays in it. And my husband, like people come to visit, they go, "Well, what is this?" And I go, "Oh, that's the shampoo." And anyway, it's sort of making commentary on corporate. But I was in a dark place, and I couldn't figure out what was the point of having an art show and what did it all mean. And um, I've heard about this show of Byzantine icons by Helen Evans at the Met, and I'm a very spiritual, even I'd say religious person, and I've just never been very drawn to icons. But she said that icons were a source of comfort to a nation besieged, and they're made of these multiple layers, thin layers of symbolism and meaning and reverence, and they build up into this flat plane, which kind of reminded me of digital because I'm working in this space that is like there's no limit to how many layers I can put in a painting when I'm working online, and yet it's almost spiritual, it's endless. And yet these icons, this is a physical process. You take a board and you're doing a prayer for a week. I think I was one of the only, I know I was in this class with my Rabboni out in New Mexico. I did a prayer for a week and did the Theotokos, the bright shining Mary. And they had a different relationship to the viewer that was one of where the relationship was where they spoke. Even those first portraits, I was trying to get them to speak and say something off the wall. And this just brought me back to an exciting place in my work. And I came back in this torrent of grief and what outpouring of joy. I came back and did this piece called Pale Male. And it's my first, what I would call diamondscape. And I remember artists at the time were saying, "You can't call that a diamondscape. You can't call that after your name." And, I say, "Well, thank you." And a lawyer who thought I should get a patent on these said, "Oh, Roz, they're just jealous." And you know what? I feel that as women artists, if we've done something, we've worked in a field 30 years and we make something inventive, I think it's fine, especially, and it works. I mean, otherwise I'd have to call these pieces, they're paintings that you interact with, that change over time, that source everything. It's Diamondscape works, so I use it and I'm proud of it. We have to own our own worth. Anyway, you can see at the center of this, the words "love one another" are really the key to this piece. The World Trade Center comes in from either side. An electronic Jesus is here in the middle on a kind of electronic cross. The famous bird pale male is looking three ways. It's really about finding your home when everything's lost. And it just came, yes, directly out of my heart. I'm going to click on this and go into the web and this is early. This is 2008. You have to imagine you're standing in front of this painting and you're looking at it and it's backlit by light. It's about 4 feet high physically. And whether you go inside it or not, you can still find all these layers, and it's still a painting that has to be about beauty and form and some kind of communication that is speaking to you, hopefully. But you do have the alternative here with the kind of medium we're using. And I sensed this early that I said, I can invite people into my paintings the way those icons did. So I'm going right in here and I'm just going to play a little bit of this for you.
Perhaps you've heard the story of Pale Male, the red-tailed hawk, who made his bizarre pilgrimage to New York City and determined his perch to be directly across from Woody Allen's Fifth Avenue balcony window. His every feather magnified in the crosshairs of an alien fan club. He ignored the applause and focused on furthering a tradition, one that proved Hawk scripture amazingly adaptable. Watching the massive steel girders of my own familiar perch ping-pong to the ground in less than an hour led me to ponder my own life support structures. Were they real or illusion? Will these shoes make me an Olympic contender? Will there be love without sorrow when I adorn this new scent? Will this very special water quench my thirst? Such contemporary fairy tales held a strong pull. They paid my salary. However, the moments that resonate most are uncertifiable without documentation. They connect to a larger story and erupt from the deepest recesses of the human heart, where unbeknownst to the world, a monumental, life-changing response occurs. None of these moments are recorded on my resume. This scripture revolves around a crown whose end results, by Wall Street standards, appear rather dismal, i.e. crucified, buried. Surely a non-capitalistic experience, and yet one that rises high. When confronted with such a scepter, one can retreat to familiar ground, or like pale mail, lift your wings and with all respect to the rational universe, cross the great divide towards home.
Well, I ended up playing the whole thing because I wanted you to kind of get where it's coming from. I want to add that ordained as an interfaith minister. I'm very interested in all the religions, which basically are about love ultimately. And I wanted to share with you that technologically and intellectually, it's very important to me that these pieces, I call them like the Gutenberg press of imagery, because the early days of the Gutenberg, of the, where words became democratized, it was kind of ugly compared to the manuscripts of the time. But as time went on, we got Shakespeare and beautiful words, and other people were, the bibliography kind of opened it all up because you not only source what you did, but you source where you got your sources. This is my ongoing argument with AI, but you can see that I source everything. It's also in Spanish, and all of my Diamondscapes source anyone or anything in it that I haven't created myself. And I'm going to just hurry here. Walter Liedtke at the Met was a big fan. He had this piece in his office. Planned to give it to the Met. Died too early. We all have our ups and downs. That was a big one, but mainly the loss of him. Gail Levin, the renowned art historian, was so taken with the piece, and she invited me to travel with her to Japan, where we spoke about it together. It's also in the collection of the 9/11 Memorial Museum. And it's in a book that Gail has written about 9/11 and 3/11 that's been published in Japan. Also, here's the piece on the wall with me interacting with it at Christ Church in Sag Harbor. It's been bequeathed to that church and is right beside a 50-foot high Tiffany stained glass window. Okay, I know we are getting close. This is how my Diamondscapes the process. Like I start on the wall. I mean, very physically. I was commissioned to do 300 years of history by the Shelter Island Museum about the Havens family. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations across the top. And I went and my team, we photographed all of the artifacts. My team being mostly me, but I do have 2 other people who I work with. And then it's like a big bar chart here. Like you got the X going across, the Y going down of events at the time, and the Z is the content. And here's a young woman just real quickly interacting with this piece, which is a permanent installation at the Shelter Island History Museum.
You can kind of see it right here.
Yeah. What are you looking for? Oh, yeah, the document.
Now she is clicking on a QR code in a brass plaque. And she's going inside the painting, and the painting is coming alive to her on her iPad, but it's very transparent in the actual painting. Painting doesn't move, but her iPad brings the story that I was just showing you, like pale mail, up to you.
It's easier to find the American flag, I think.
I was looking for the one where it was the guy in the
like you can see here the wheel in the painting really soon. In a minute, I'll show you. The wheel is coming up. See how you can barely see it? But look how it comes up for her. So that's kind of the whole idea. Picasso once said, I wish someone could go inside my paintings and go inside the layers. I also have a piece. I'm very fortunate at the Children's Museum. I was commissioned during COVID, and we weren't planning that year to be just working on our computers together, but we did this entire piece about these Latino kids incredible stories and images about COVID, and I wove them together as an impressionistic landscape. And here I was kind of going further afield with my diamondscapes. And it's Dimon, by the way, Scapes. That's how I spell my name, Diamond. Um, but you can go inside this painting, and all of their stories and their audio come up, and you can also you turn the audio off and on, and 100 people can be doing this at once with your own earpods without disturbing anyone else. I always had my hand in drawing, and I'm always been about America, and guns are everywhere. People say, Roz, I can't believe you're drawing guns. This physically is about a 9 feet wide Kalashnikov. I mean, it's a forceful work of beauty, and yet it's got an evilness, and those two things coexist as a paradox. I'm going to quickly just show you this so you can see my process of me drawing. Now it is sped up in this, but I've got my menus up, and I don't work this fast, but I work fast. I pick my brush, I pick the tone, I pick the transparency. I go back and forth in the layers. I turn layers on and off. And I'm just going to kind of go to the end of it a little bit so you can see it. But that is showing you that. And I'm looking at my other screen, a picture of a Kalashnikov. Certainly, I don't own one. I don't even own a gun. A more recent diamondscape. And my last gun that I ever did stopped at this point because my own family was hit by the problems of guns in America, where we have more guns than people. My first cousin's son was gunned down by police, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way necessarily if it came out that way, because it's again a multi-viewpoint of the whole problem we have with too many guns and the lapse of gun laws in America, where my cousin's son had too many guns, his friends had too many guns, the police were armed like a military invasion of another country. It really brought out a lot of the problems. And let's go forward. And if I have time, I only have like 4 minutes, but I'm going to show you real quickly. You're actually,
What are Americans aiming?
You're inside.
According to Garrett's
what happened
dad,
that night.
he had always loved race cars.
I'm going to let you go into it yourself. It's called GarrettMitchell.com. But basically, you're going deep inside this painting where he worked for the Humane Society, and people entrusted his animals with him. And yet, paradoxically, he died by gunfire. His partly, well,
Police
it's complicated, but it's all about guns.
Garrett was,
and it's about caring.
in a more innocent time, Garrett hangs out with his first cousin.
Country. So everything's sourced here. You can go deep into the bibliography. I have all the sources of the guns that night, and street signs, and the police and their later interrogations by the Georgia Bureau, that wanted to find out what happened that night. And it's really a painting that is about, I mean, speaking about information, I was painting information in New York, and I'm really painting information now. And I'm trying to tell a compassionate, loving story at the same time. These are very complicated pieces, honestly. And we're getting to the end, and thank you. I haven't done a portrait in 25 years, but again, I'm talking about America, and I saw this portrait of Lincoln, and during 2021, when I saw what I thought were terrible things going on in this country, I did these pieces, and I'm fortunate right now that you can go to, there's an animation of this piece. I'm just going to quickly walk you through it. When I'm working in the computer, I can save every layer and then later animate them. So this is sort of not quite like the Diamondscapes, which I almost call my novels, but this is like a poem. And it's, I go back and you can see every line drawing that piece that I was just showing you. And I'm very pleased that these pieces, as I said, are, they're at a show right now at Carter Burden. Two large ones, and here's my friend John Van Sickle standing beside them. And they're also, I'm thrilled to say, at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. They'll be up through March in Springfield, Illinois. Coming back, I just came back from a show of an international group I'm a part of called Expressionism. I've been fortunate to show with them in 3 shows, and 2 in New York, and now 1 in Uzbekistan. Fascinating. I could tell you more about that. Again, my pieces behind them are about football and about laws and how laws keep testosterone in check in a kind of wonderful way. And it's made me think about the Olympic Games. This is a new series I've been doing. I'll be speaking at the Iceland eclipse. And again, my spiritual side and my image side will be coming together in this piece. And basically, it's the first time I'm just using words, but this is a piece where against a golden sun, phrases that people send me about light and darkness, because we're going to be going through a 2-minute eclipse there, and I'm a featured participant. I want everyone there to have access to this piece, and they will. But basically, over time, I'm going to turn, there's a sound bed, but I'm going to turn it off. Every one of you with your own phones and things can turn the sound off and on so that you don't bother other people. But basically, all these phrases have come to me from other people and myself, things about justice and how light and dark coexist. And there's an information window that sources every single one and says thank you to the people who submitted them. I invite all of you to write me at roz@rozdimon.com and submit something. There's no limit to how many of these words can come up. And what will happen ultimately is this whole page, this whole piece will go to black. But it'll be a black filled with all of our hopes and our goodness and the light of this world. Um, and just finally, I just did a piece about a woman making a cake while the tanks roll in. I don't pretend not to be political because I am. But I also don't ever aim one way. I think people are afraid, and I think that I'm going to end with this. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. That's why I chose Lincoln. That's why I choose multi-viewpoints. And this digital medium has really helped me so that I can share my vision with a much larger world. However, I'm still all about going next door and working with your neighbor. I just did a little talk to people here at Shelter Island, and they mean as much to me as any Venice biennial. And you can read more about my story, which is a very kind of innovative website that I've designed over the years and keep changing, that goes from 1979 to today. And it's a story of my stories and other stories and my imagery from then to now. And with that, I thank you. I'm a minute over, and thank you again. Thanks. I miss that audio. I always turn mine on when I'm clapping for people because you forget that anyone's even there. But
Yeah,
but at
yeah.
least you
No,
can't throw oranges.
we're here. We're with you, and all the hands are going up. So we did have a question in the chat. We'll just take a few minutes for some questions. So Veronica says, "Can you speak more on breaking the rules that you mentioned in the code?"
Breaking the rules. Well, I am a traditionalist in a way, and I am about breaking rules, but I do believe in, at least from an art point of view, that it's really great to still draw from the model. I mean, I remember asking AI recently. I have all these arguments with AI lately, but very fascinating. That's a whole nother thing that puts a bookend on digital art. But I was asking it, and it said, well, make sure you say that artists don't copy, they innovate. But you know what? I went, no, no, no. The great artists always copied. They always copied other great artists. Remember, they'd sit there in the museums, and I had to copy great artworks. I mean, how can you know how to? I mean, I think we have to look at the past before we go into the future. So I'm kind of an old fogey in new clothes. I think that's why some of my collectors really don't have much other contemporary art. Some of them, some of the biggest ones. And Walter Lieke was the curator of Rembrandt and would always talk to me about how Rembrandt made all these innovations. I mean, etchings weren't even numbered in that time. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm sort of someone who I like obedience, and yet I think at a point there's a time for disobedience. But I am someone who believes in rules. And I like knowing what they are.
Mhm. Well said, Roz. And that's similar, not that it has to make the comparison, but that is similar to Pollock in that he studied, just Picasso. He studied indigenous people's art. He studied the Mexican muralists, right?
Which I
He,
didn't know. I'm glad. No, I've learned
yeah,
a lot from you. Yeah.
he took all that history and then he made it his own, but it's not, there's no such thing really as 100% original because everything we innovate taking from the past. So very well said. Now,
Absolutely.
Do you have an address that we can send our words of hope, that last piece?
Yes, please. ROZ. I guess I could put it in the chat, but it's easier. I always write with a pen. It's so much quicker. ROZ at ROZDIMON.com. Roz at RozDiamond.com.
Very good. Any other questions? Now, I have one question. With all the different sources,
I think Colleen has her hand up.
okay, we'll get to Colleen,
Oh,
but I'm
okay.
going for it. No, I'm just kidding. What I'm
Okay.
wondering is, with all the sources, do you have to get copyright for all those, or how do you work with that? Like,
That's an
this is,
excellent, thank you. That, when I went into that information button, if I'm going to use a piece from the Civil War and I'm not even sure if it's copyright free, I call the museum and say, look, I could certainly try to reenact and paint the battlefield, of the Civil War, but I'd like to put this in, and it's going to be in a nonprofit center, even though there were grants that helped me do it. And I said, and I'll be glad to source you in the information blog, my bibliography, and I go out to everybody. I've called people in Australia about their DNA strand for a piece I did about a frog, and they just thought it was so much fun. But I think it's very important to source, and I think that AI, I don't care how long the writing is, I think you should be able to find everything that they source. I think
very
that's
good.
really problematic.
Hmm. Yeah, it gets complex with AI because even though AI says it's copyright free, they could be grabbing it from another
Oh,
source.
they're
So,
grabbing everything they can. I think it's fast. The whole AI topic is a whole different one, of course, but yeah, it's going to be our best and our worst selves. So let's feed it the best stuff we can.
mhm. Okay. And how about Colleen? What would you like to ask Colleen?
Amazing, Roz. And the trip back to the 80s was enjoyable. The Pale Male, um, you mentioned the Pale Male had an alien fan club, and I just wanted to know, what did you mean by that?
That's a good question. Pale male, for those who are younger, even my programmer says, Roz, I wasn't born when the 9/11 like thing happened, or I was like, oh, right. But Pale Male was a very famous hawk in New York City, lived on the Upper West Side, made his home in a famous star's balcony window, and all of the bird watchers in Central Park were watching him all the time. And so I was kind of talking from the point of view of the bird, that he had all these spectators down there with their cameras and their things on him all the time, watching him in that little scope of the lens of their camera. So they were his alien fan club.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you for answering. I guess in the indigenous way, like, the bird is our brother, but I
Yeah.
see the alien fan club as being the camera, the technology to the bird.
Yeah.
But
And the,
not the animate person, because we consider the bird to be our brother.
well, I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
Thank you for your explanation.
You're welcome.
I have one more question. Do you think of your stories, the layered stories, do you think of it almost like cinematic? It's almost like a movie, but in a completely different way. How do you think about that? Do you think of it like a
Exactly
movie?
like that, like a movie in a moment. It's like a movie in a moment, and I think it is a new dimension in time. And other artists are starting to do this, and there are other storytelling things where you're seeing things. I'm like, when you think of math of X, Y, and Z, this Z space we're in right now. Look at us. So like, I don't know how many people are here, and we're all talking to each other across the world. So it's a fascinating space that we have here, digital, and I've always wanted to bring touch and warmth to the space. I mean, even though people say, "Oh, well, look, they're looking at their phones on the phone on the subway," I feel like our need for human contact is almost insatiable.
Mhm.
Like, who's writing me? Who's writing me? And so I hope as this medium matures, we can bring more of our, as you said, Joyce, and I share that with you, our best selves to the
Mhm.
table. I mean, it doesn't mean we don't talk about problematic things.
Mhm. Absolutely. Roz, I want to thank you so much on behalf of the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center.
Thank
And
you.
it was just remarkable, your journey. It was nostalgic personally for me, 1980s in New York City, 1990s SVA, seeing how the technology evolved and what you did with it. It was so groundbreaking at the time and so unknown. And
Thank
we're
you. All I
forward.
want is a retrospective and a book. So if you know anybody, I'm really interested in telling this story. Not just
Yeah,
about me, but a larger time. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Put it out to the universe, as they say.
Yeah.
And when are you going to Iceland?
In August, invited to Iceland, and right now because of all the politics going on, it's really interesting. I said, well, maybe it'll be one giant peace protest, and this it'll be a place to bring people together. It's a beautiful, peaceful, tough kind of country in a way. I've heard resilient people, and this will be a 3-day conference based on a 2-minute complete eclipse of the sun by the moon. And my piece, I'm going to be sharing it more and more as we get closer, and I'm going to be thrilled to be a participant and a speaker there.
Well, we can't wait to see what the follow-up is. This program has been recorded, so this will be available on my YouTube channel, Joyce Raimondo YouTube, and perhaps it will also be available on the Pollock Krasner social media. And Roz, again, thank you so much, and have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day or evening wherever you are. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank
And
you.
always evolving creativity. So, thank you.